Welcome back to IRStack. In this video, we are going to work on the relationship between labels and context so that we could show the real labels inside the labels column of this page. And also, if you open this context, then you will notice that there are real labels showing there. So we have to make it functional as well. Right now, we are showing just static labels there. So let's work on that. So to add labels in a contact, we have to create another table that will save the relationships between contact and label. So we already have two tables created, contact and the labels. But now we want to have data that would describe the relationship between contact and label. So if there was a single label that we needed to add, then we could add it in the contact table as well. For example, I could add a new field that would be label ID, and then we could add the ID of the specific label. But in our case, we want to add unlimited labels to the contact. For that, we cannot use the contact table. Instead, we have to create a new table with the relationship between contact and labels. And let us create that new table so that I could explain you. So here I am going to call it contact labels or contact label, whatever you can use any name, it does not matter at all. So here, first of all, we need ID. So that is compulsory with the auto increment and primary key. Okay. Second, we need the contact ID, and the type would be integer, and it is not nullable because we never want to have this field empty whenever we insert data in this table. So after that, we need another field that is label ID, and the type would still be integer, and this should not be null. And after that is done, we have to create foreign key relationship between contact ID and the contact table. Also, we have to create the foreign key relationship between the label ID and the label table. So we can add that after creating this table. So first of all, I'm going to create this table. So if you also want to see which query we are using to create this table, you can see this is that query that you can use if you want to create this table. So we used this software to create a table, but if you don't want to use a software, you just want to run a query, you can just write down this same query and it will create the same table for you. Anyways, so next we need to create the relationships. So to create a foreign key, I will double click on that and click on this. This will allow me to create the foreign key here. I have to specify the table where I want to link this field. So as we want to link the contact ID with the contact table, and further here we have to specify the field where we want to link this field. So I hope that you are already familiar about with the concept of foreign keys. If not, then I would recommend you to learn about the foreign keys. So if you understand what are the foreign keys and how do they work, then this would be easy for you to understand. So here I am specifying that I want to link this contact ID with the ID field of the contact table. And let's just click on the OK. Similarly, on the label ID, I will do the same. Select the label table and select the ID field. And then press OK. All right, now I'm going to submit this change, and you will notice the query that you may also use if you want. So these are the two queries that are generated to add these foreign keys. So if you run this same query, then you can achieve the same goal by adding the foreign keys. All right, now we have the contact label table and foreign keys are set up. Now we will start from adding the relationship manually first. Once we have the feature ready in the UI, then we will be adding these relationships automatically from the UI. So for now, let's add it from there. Here you have to add the same ID that is in the contact. Open the contact, and for example, I want to add the label in this contact, hello again. So I would use this ID that is 25 and go to the contact table, paste the contact ID here, and also the label ID. Go to the label table and pick the label that you want to add. For example, I want to add this label. The ID is 9. Copy that ID and go back to this table and add that ID. Now save it or run your query. So here you will see that somewhere we have inserted the data. Yeah, this is the query that was run when we added the contact ID and the label ID. So now we have the relationship. Now we use this relationship to show data in the UI. So for example, I am on this page, and in this page I am showing the hard-coded static labels. I'm going to replace that, and I will update the logic so that it could get the data from the Node.js. Before doing that, I have to update uh, the Node.js project to add another endpoint to get the labels. So in the index.js, I would create another endpoint, and the method would be get, and here the name of the endpoint would be contact labels, and here I will accept the contact ID. So with that, we will give it back all of the labels by using the contact ID. So for example, if we got the contact ID, then we can easily use that contact ID to get all of the label IDs. So, so let's try that. So before doing that, I will show you SQL query here that how it is going to work. So for example, uh, here I will run select all from contact label where contact ID is 25, I guess. Okay, so you can see that we have the data coming with the help of this query, but still this data is not useful because we have the IDs, but in the UI we want the titles of the label. So for that we have to update this query to we will be using the join to get the label title with the help of this ID. So I am hoping that you are already familiar with the joins in the SQL. If not, then you can simply go there, W3 schools, and I would recommend you to learn these things. For example, you should learn SQL joins, left join especially, and also you should learn about the foreign keys. So you should read it from here. If you don't understand what it is and how to make it work, you can read it from here, or you can learn it from somewhere else if you want. So once you have the clear concept about the foreign keys, and you are your concepts are clear about the joins, especially the left join, then you are ready to work on this part. So now I am going to use the left join like this. With the help of this, you can also see from the diagram that with the left join, you will have some part of the table 2 in the table 1. You can use it. So, so, so for example, here I want, so left join comes always before the where condition. So I will type uh, left join on. Here I would write the name of the table where I want to join. I want to join with the contact table. Actually, not on here. Left join contact. After that, I have to type on space. Then I have to specify the condition for this join. And the condition is contact label dot id. Label dot contact id should be equal to the contact dot id. So with that, we are telling it that we want to join the contact from the contact table in this result to use. So we want to join the contact in this result where the contact ID of the contact label matches with the ID of the contact table. So let's check it practically. I'm going to run it and let's see. So here you can see all of the values are coming. So we can, I hope that this is sufficient. So let's go back to the Node.js, and I'm going to replace this. And here, instead of hard-coded ID, I would like to use it from the request.body dot contact ID. Okay. After that, this code would be the same. I am running the query, and if there is an error, then it will throw the status error and also the error in the response. Also, I'm sending back the result. So let's see if it is working. For that, I'm going to copy this and put it in the URL to test the feature. So this is not a correct ID, so I have to pass the right ID, and for example, 25 is the correct ID, I guess. No. Okay. There is some error in our query. It is saying that unknown column undefined. Okay. Let's see what is the issue. So here, instead of request body, we should have used the request.params. That's why it could not get the contact ID. Now it should work. So let's reload it, and you will see that we have the contact label. By the way, there is a mistake that we did. As we want to get the label, so we should, instead of joining it with the contact table, we should have joined it with the label. So let's use the label, and here use label ID is equal to label dot id. Okay. And if you run it, you will still get the result, but this time you are getting the title of the label instead of the contact. So let's make those changes here as well. Okay. Now, if you reload it, you will see that, okay, there is an error. Okay, you can see that we are getting the labels correctly. Now this endpoint is ready to be consumed in the front end. For that, go back to the front end and open the contact.html file, because this is the file where we want to load the labels. So when we call the function load contact, we can call another function that would be load contact. Sorry, the load labels. So I'm going to call this function from inside of the load contact, because here I already have the contact ID. So I would just use that. And here, instead of get contact, I would create another function, get contact labels. And here I would create another function that would be render labels. So let's create these functions. Function add async here. Similarly, we need to add another function that would be render labels. Okay. So here, let us write the logic to get the contact from the get the label from the backend. So I'm going to the common.js to copy the code that we want to use. So this code would be the same, but the endpoint would be different in our case for the load, for the get contact labels. And instead of this, we know that our endpoint name is, let me show you. So this is our endpoint name. So I'm going to copy it and paste here. Okay, now it's fine. So it should just work fine. And instead of contact, we know that we are getting the contact labels here. So return the contact labels. And now here we have the contact labels in this variable as well. After that, I want to render these labels. For that, let us complete the render labels function. Actually, before doing that, let us test if we are getting the labels or not. For that, I'm going to alert it json.stringify contact labels and reload it. Okay, I can see that I'm getting the empty array. That's mean I am this specific contact ID has not labels in it, but we know that labels are in this context. So I will click on that, and you can see that the labels are coming. So now we can consume this array data to render the labels. So let's go back to the section where we are showing the labels. Here you can see that we have loaded the labels statically, these are not dynamic, so I would just cut one label div and remove all others so that I could reuse it. And scroll down back there, get the element document dot query selector dot labels. So it would select this element, and once we got this element, we will insert our label into that element. So let labels element. Okay, so in this variable we are saving the labels element. So this variable actually has the labels DOM element. So now I'm going to create another variable, uh, labels HTML is equal to empty string, and now I am going to run a loop against contact labels array. So contact labels dot for each, and here we have the label, and now I can concatenate labels HTML with this string, and instead of hard coding this label one, I would use the title coming from the label variable. Now I have to, after this loop is completed, I want to inject this HTML string into the labels element. For that, type labels element dot inner HTML is equal to labels HTML. Okay, now let's try it. Okay, you can see that now label is dynamically coming from the backend. So that's perfect. After that, we have to make this thing functional. So right now, if you click on that in this dialog, uh, the labels are hard coded in this dialog. We have to get them from the Node.js. So in this dialog, we should show all of the labels. It does not matter if this label is related with this contact or not, but it can be any label. But once all labels are displayed in this dialog, we will then show the tick mark after the labels that are already selected inside this page or in this contact. So let's do that step by step. First of all, we need to display the labels. So if you scroll up, you can see this is the dialog where we have to show the labels. And this is the one label, and so these are the three labels that were showing there. We don't need all of these three. I will just remove the other two. I will keep the one so that I could use this HTML as a template to insert it dynamically in my layout. So I will cut it shortly, but before that, I will create another function. I would name it load labels in labels picker dialog, and here I will call another function that would be get labels. So I hope that this function is defined somewhere here, maybe. No, this function is not defined anywhere. So I would just define this function here, get function get labels, and type async, and then let response is equal to fetch backend base URL plus slash labels plus uh, after, okay, we don't need anything else after the labels. And here we need to add the await to resolve the promise coming from the fetch function. And after that, I need the data from the response.json. Okay, now we are returning the label. But before testing it, we know that we have to add this endpoint in the Node.js. So let's go back to the Node.js and add this endpoint. So if you scroll up, actually we already have this endpoint. Let me see where we are using it. Actually, we are already using it. So I hope that, I guess this is in the index.html. Let me search it. Yeah. So we are using these two lines here in the common.js file, and also we are writing this line again in the contact.html. So instead of writing this again and again, we will just move this code inside the common.js, and I will reuse this function instead of that. Let data is equal to get labels. So now I'm reusing the code. That is the good practice. Similarly, I will call this function here as well. I'm already calling that, and then let receive the data is equal to, I forgot to add the weight that was compulsory here. Okay, add await here as well because we are getting data as the promise. So we have to resolve the promise with the help of the await. Now let's alert this data to make sure that it is working. Obviously, it would be working because this was working in the common.js file already. So I just want to take a look. We did not call this function yet, so we have to call that as well. Okay, it did not work. The reason might be that we did not add the await when we called that function, or maybe there is an error. So let me see. I guess something is wrong with this endpoint. Uh, yeah, I got it. What is the issue? The issue is that there is no endpoint with the S, so that was the mistake. Now you can see that I am getting all of the labels in the form of alert that is coming from here. So after we have the data, we can now render these labels. So let me create another function that would be render labels in render labels in labels picker dialog. And here obviously we have to add the function in the start, and we have to receive the labels that we want to load. And here I want a variable let labels HTML is equal to empty string, and labels dot for each. We are getting label in every iteration of for each loop. And now we have to concatenate with this variable. Okay, now we need to get the template HTML template that we want to repeat. So for that, let us find that here. This is the label, and we know that we have to load it in the dialog content. we have the ID label picker dialog, and inside that we have dialog content. So let's select that element first. Actually, before that, I want to paste the HTML that I have cut from there. And after it is ready, after loop is finished, we want to insert this in the document.query selector dialog. Let me see, it is label picker dialog. And inside the label picker dialog, we have another element, and the name of that element is dialog content. This is actually a class, so that's why we will specify dot dialog. In this way, we have access to that container, and inside that div element, I want to use inner HTML equal to labels HTML. Now, if you test it, you will notice that nothing is added there. Okay, let me see what is wrong there. So we did not call this function yet. Obviously, we have to call it first. So pass the data to this function. Now, if you click on that, you will see that we have three labels, but these are still showing the same label. So to fix that, we have to remove this one and instead use the dynamic value that is coming from the label variable. Use label.title. And now if you click on that, you will see that now it is showing the real labels coming from the database. Okay. Now we have to work on these tick icons. So I hope that is also very easy. So for that, instead of calling this function here, I would call it in the function where we are getting the contact labels, not all labels. So here I am calling the get contact label. So at this line, I have access to all of the contact labels. So I will pass these contact labels into this function. Then we will have these labels available. Now we know that, so this is actually showing all of the labels, and this variable has only those labels that are related with this contact. So in our current case, this variable would have only one label because only one label was added in this contact. So now we can use this variable in this iteration inside the for each iteration loop, that if the contact ID if the contact label ID matches with the label ID. So I will tell you more practically here. So for example, we want to show this tick icon only if this label belongs to the current contact. For that, I will cut it from here and I would use this syntax. And here I would use a ternary operator that would be actually, before doing that, I would create another function that would be actually a helper function that, and we will name it function is label in contact labels. So basically, this function would give us would return a Boolean value, true or false, if given label is found inside the contact label. So label and contact labels. So this would be a single label and this would be the array of the contact labels. So this variable would have the data structure coming from this query that we generated here. And this label would have the data coming from this table. Okay. So I would return and I would use contact labels dot find. So I hope you are already familiar with the function find. Uh, in the find function, we have to pass a callback function, and here we have the contact label. And here I will return true or false with the help of the condition. Here I'm checking that if contact label dot label ID, because you know that uh, in this query we have the label ID, this one. So we can use that label ID to match it with the label dot ID. We know that this label ID is the foreign key, and this is linked with the primary ID key of the label table. So we know that if these are same, then this is the label that we have selected. So now I will cut this code, and instead of that, I would use a ternary operator inside here, where I would say that is label in the contact labels, and here I will pass the label and I will pass the contact labels. Okay, and here I'm using the ternary operator, that if this returns as true, then that's mean we have to use the check mark, otherwise keep it empty. Okay, so now if you reload this and click on that, something is wrong. So let us understand what is the matter. So in the console, we have an error that is saying that the contact label is not defined. So let me understand from where it is coming. Contact labels. Why is that? So if we click on that, it should take us to the exact line where this error is happening. And okay, yeah, the issue is that this variable is really not available. So for example, we are passing the label, but we did not pass the contact label. That's why we were facing this problem. We have to receive this data in the second parameter. Now let's try it. Okay. So there is an issue. Let me understand what is the issue. So the issue is that I was using the wrong property name. There is no capital ID. It should be ID with a small letter I. So let's try it again. Okay. I think I did something wrong here. I should have used the ternary operator on the check mark, but I was using on another icon. So that's why I messed it up. So let me copy paste only this line, and I will actually, let me just undo it entirely and cut this code and use this syntax and use this function again, pass the label and pass the contact labels, and use a ternary operator, and if it is true, then use this string, otherwise use this one. Okay, now you can see that it will select show the check mark after only those labels which are the part of this contact. So that is perfect. After this is done, we have to implement the next feature where if you click on the label, then that label should be added to this contact, and also a check mark should be visible there. So for that, go to the Node.js project, and there we have to create that endpoint first. So I'm going to copy paste this line, and here instead of this one, we need to use the post because we are going to create or insert this label. So this would basically insert the data inside the contact labels table that is available here. Okay. And we are expecting the contact ID and the label ID in the request.body. So let contact ID is equal to request.body dot contact ID. Similarly, we need the label ID from request.body.label ID. Okay. Next, we need to run the query. So I'm going to use this one. I'm going to get all of this code as well. And here I would define another variable, let SQL is equal to select all from the, actually this is not select, this is insert. So insert into contact underscore labels. Uh, Here I would specify the field names where I want to insert contact ID, label ID. After that, I need to add the list of values in the parentheses. That would be contact ID. So use this syntax to add them, and label ID. You will notice that this time we did not add the single quote around the values. The reason is that we don't need to add the single quotes around the integer values. But if the type is string or varchar, then we have to add the single quotes around it. So after that is done, let us test it. But before testing that, we have to consume it. So here, if user clicks on a label, then we call a function close dialog, but we have to change that. Instead of calling this function directly, we will call another function that would create this relationship. So I would just cut this code because I need it in the next function, and a new function would be uh, toggle uh, toggle contact label. So I used the word toggle because you know that if you click on the same label that was already part of the contact, then it would uncheck it or unselect it. And if it was not the part of the contact already, if this was not selected, then if you click on this one, then it would select that and add it in the relationship table. So that's why this function would do uh, two behaviors. So that's why I use the toggle word. So create this function toggle contact label, and in this I will get the label that was clicked. Okay, and also I need the contact ID. I'm just commenting this code. I will need it later. So further, I need the contact ID. So let's see how we can get the contact ID. We know that contact ID is available somewhere. So we now contact ID is available here. I can pass it from there, and we, we have to receive the contact ID here as well. Now I have to pass the contact ID here as well. And obviously we have to add the third parameter, that would be contact ID. Now I can pass this contact ID into this function. Okay. After that, we know that we have label ID and the contact ID. So here we will pass the label dot ID, and second parameter is the contact ID. And here I would say label ID, comma, contact ID. Okay. After that, another thing that I was thinking, uh, that if this label is already selected and user clicks on it, then we should delete this entry from the relationship of the contact. So that's mean we should delete this entry in the contact label. And if user clicks on a new label, then we should insert. So we should be doing two operations because of the toggle. So here either we can use a toggle or we can use two functions based on condition. Or here we already have this variable. This function is giving us the boolean. It will tell us that if this label is selected or not. So I can reuse it. So I would just create another variable is label in contact labels. Or I can just make it more meaningful. That would be is label selected. Okay. So I can reuse it here as well. Also, I need to pass this boolean value here as well. So with the help of this boolean value, we will know that if we have to delete the entry or if we have to insert the entry in the database. So I will use this variable. If this variable is true, then that's mean it was already selected, and now we have to delete this entry. And if the value of this variable is false, then that's mean we have to insert this entry in the database. So let's call a function for the case if it is not selected. So here I would use fetch. Before that, I need to add a wait. Here I have to add the async fetch. Here slash again contact labels, and the method this time would be post, and in the header we need to pass the content type. So let me get the content type syntax. Okay, so here I will replace it with the correct values. We need to pass the label ID and the contact ID. Okay, so with that, after it is created successfully, we want to reload the labels in the dialog and re-render them. So for that, Let me see what we can do for that. So you can see that if we call this function again, then this would again get the labels and re-render them. Okay. But for that, we need to have access to the contact labels and the contact ID. So I'm thinking that because this contact labels is available only inside the scope of this function, but we need it outside as well. So I am thinking to define this variable outside of this function so that this variable could be globally available everywhere. So here I would define it let contact labels, and here I would just reuse it. In this way, whenever I will load data in this variable, then that data would be uh, available in this variable globally. Similarly, when we get the contact ID, we should store it in the global level or global scope. So let contact ID is equal to, by default, it would be undefined contact ID. So I already had declared it above, so I'm just removing that. And actually, let's take it on the top. And okay, now we know that contact ID is available. And we don't have to pass the contact ID every time because whenever we call the get contact function, then at that stage, actually, this function is inside the let me see, inside the common.js, so that's why we have to pass it there. But other than that, the functions that are defined in this file, we don't have to pass the contact ID to those functions. For example, this function is available in this file, and we know that on the top we already have a contact ID available, so we don't have to pass the contact ID here, this one. So I'm just going to remove it. We don't need to receive it here as well, neither here. Remove it from here as well. So similarly, we know that we have saved the contact labels in a global variable. That's mean we don't have to pass the variable here because we can access this variable inside this function without passing it through the parameter. So now we are accessing this global variable that was defined above. Okay, and we don't need to pass the contact ID here as well because we have them available in the global level. Just remove them from here. Okay. After that, we don't have to pass the contact ID because we have it available globally. So I will remove this one. And now, once the data is inserted, we have to call a function that I was talking about earlier, that is load labels in the label picker dialog. Copy this function and call it after label is added in the contact. Just call it and add the await before it. Now let's try. Click on that. There is an error. We made some mistake, so let's try to fix that. Go to the console. Here it is saying that label is not defined. If you click on this, it will take you to the exact place where this issue is happening. So let us try to understand. The line number is 167. So let's find that line number. Okay. So I made a mistake here that I defined this. I was using this function outside of the for loop, but the label is defined or available only inside this for each loop. That's why it was not working. Now let us try it. If you click on this, you can see it is working. Now I am going to check if it is inserting label in the database. So I clicked on that, but there was an error and it is saying that contact is not defined. So if you click on that, it is telling me that the issue is on the line number 201. So let's go to there. Yeah, uh, here instead of contact, we should have passed the contact ID, because contact ID is the thing that we want to pass, not the contact. So now let's try it again and click on the hello world. I got an error, and the error is saying that this error is coming from the Node.js, and it is saying that this table does not exist. Actually, this table is without the letter S. So let's fix it. Now, if I hit it again, then it should fix the problem. Okay. It has inserted, but there was an error. Error is saying that maybe this was an old error. So let's reload it. And you can see that now we have two labels showing because we already have added that label. And now we have a checkbox with two labels. But the issue is that it did not load it. It did not refresh the dialog, because it should have added that checkbox immediately when you add it. So let us try to understand that. So I'm going to click on that again. Okay, something is wrong, so I will add an alert. Huh. Okay, I think this is working correctly, but the issue was that we did not update the contact labels. And if you try to find the code that is updating the label, you will notice that uh, we are updating it here. So first of all, we have to call the function load labels that would update the contact labels variable, and then we will call the next function that would depend on the contact label. So let us first call this one. This would refresh the labels on the top here, and this would then render it in the dialog. As you know, we have clicked on the same button several times. That's why it has added two times. So I'm going to remove all of these relationships so that I could try it from scratch. Okay, reload it, and this time you will see nothing in the labels list. Click on that, click on the new, and you can see that the checkbox is added in the real time. So if I click on the hello world, that would also be added, and you will see the check mark, and you will see in the background the labels are also updating in the real time. But if you again click on the same label, then it would not hit the Node.js. You will see here, for example, if I click on that, you can see nothing in the network tab. That's mean uh, it is the if else condition is also working correctly. So when you click on the same label again, it goes in the if condition. So now we have to write a logic in the if condition. Okay, for that I am going to call the same code again with the different method, that would be delete. And in uh, this time I still have to pass the same parameter label ID and the contact ID. So, but we have to move this code outside of the else condition because we want to call these two functions uh, in both cases. If condition is called, it would delete the data, and hence we want to refresh the labels and the labels in the dialog. So that's why I moved it outside of this. And after that is done, I would then add the close dialog function. So now let's go back to the Node.js and add another endpoint for deleting the contact labels. Here use a delete function in the express. And instead of insert, I would use delete from contact label where contact ID is equal to contact ID and label ID is equal to label ID. So in this way, it would delete only those contact labels where these two conditions match. Okay. Now let's test it. For that, click on this. And if as hello world is already selected, so if you click on the same label again, it should remove this from this dialog, and also it should remove the hello world from the layout in the background. So let's try that. I clicked on that, but I saw an error in the console. So let us understand what is the issue. Toggle contact label. Okay, so actually this is the issue. So when we found the label in the contact, then it returns the object, but we need to return the boolean. So we have to convert it to the boolean. For that, I would define a variable let found item is equal to this, and then I will check if found item, then return true, otherwise return false. So in this way, I would get pure boolean. Earlier, I was not getting boolean. That's why uh, an object was coming in this variable, and I was passing the object in the parameter of the HTML tag. So that was breaking the HTML. Now let us try it again. If you click on that and let us hit on the hello world again, you will see that we have clicked on we have hit the Node.js endpoint with the delete method. And also you would notice that the check mark has been removed in the real time. Also, the hello world has been removed in the real time in the background as well. So if you click on this, you will notice the same behavior. So now this is very stable. Okay. By the way, as we are already applying it when you click on that, so we don't need the apply button here. So I'm just going to remove the apply button. So after that, it has a button create label. Let us see what does it do. Okay, if you click on that, it will open another dialog that would be create label. And this is the same dialog that we created here. So that's mean we have to move this dialog into such place where we could reuse it. So it is already available in the sidebar, and we also have a function in the common.js that will show that dialog. So let us call that function. Before that, I will go to the common.js file to find that function. Open dialog, show dialog, I guess. Yeah, this is the function that I have to call inside the contact HTML. So if user clicks on the create label button, then I would call another function on click, open this. Okay, so let us try that. I clicked on that. I clicked on the create label. The create label is visible, but that is behind this overlay. So that's mean when you click on that, before showing the create label dialog, we have to hide the existing dialog. Okay. For that, I would have to call this function first, and then I would have to call this function to show the create label dialog. So let's try that. Create label. You can see that it has uh, hide the other dialog, and it has shown this dialog for us. So now if you want to add a new label, type XYZ, click on the save. In the labels, you would see the new label. Okay, I noticed another issue that I just created a label, but that label did not appear in this dialog. The reason is that the data in this dialog is loaded only once when you open the layout, or it is reloaded when you select a data, but it does not reload when you create the data. So solution to this problem is that I think we should call of the same function that loads data in the dialog. We should call that function every time when you click on this button. So whenever you click on that, it should reload the data every time. So let us find that function where we click on that. So yeah, here we are showing the dialog. Actually, I am going to create a new function with the function name show label picker dialog, and again function show label picker dialog, and I will call this one. And also at the same time, I would call this function as well, because this is the function that would refresh the data inside the dialog. So that would just work fine. Okay, if you click on that, it will take a few seconds, but it will show you the fresh data. So if I click on the create label and type ABC123 and save it, now if you click on that again, you can see that that new label is visible and available whenever the label dialog was opened. So this is how I am refreshing the data in the label speaker dialog.